The production of this program is made possible thanks to the support of the following and viewers like you. We're sitting on a gold mine in reality and figuratively, says Michael Goehring of the Mining Association of British Columbia. We're sitting on it at the most critical time in our relationship with the United States. Here's the problem. We're not mining critical minerals because the permitting process is too long. It's a problem on a number of fronts. One of them is the foreign investment that's required or needed to support critical mineral mining in Canada. Foreign investments that we need if we hope to establish new trading channels. Investment funds that are unfortunately also running out of patience. In October, BHP Chief Executive Mike Henry told the Globe and Mail, when it comes to these big capital projects, time is both money and risk. He said, so permitting timeframes have to be shorter. A failure to speed up the permitting process means capital slated for investment here is starting to look elsewhere. Henry said, Canada is a resource-rich nation, steeped in mining history, and has a really good talent base. But many other countries have also resources, and they've spotted the opportunity and they're chasing after it aggressively. Michael Goehring agrees. Of course, we need to attend to the environmental regulations, he says. However, there are many areas where Canada and British Columbia can streamline the permitting process. It's essential that we do that to meet North American demands for the minerals and elements that will power the green economy. I invited Michael Goehring, the president of the Mining Association of British Columbia, to join me for a conversation that matters about permitting prosperity. It really is about permitting prosperity, isn't it?
It is about permitting prosperity, Steve.
Like, if we take a look at this critical moment that we're in right now, we're looking at an uncertain relationship with the United States. And up until this point, we would go, yeah, I mean, it's vitally important to us that we have that relationship with the United States because that's where we're going to sell these critical minerals. But we now also have to say we can't rely on a single market if there's uncertainty about when and where and how tariffs might impact these very essential minerals.
Yeah, well, we're in a time of extreme disruption and uncertainty. And the Trump administration has really thrown a wrench into the development of what we referred to as kind of North American critical mineral supply chains. In the last 5 or 6 years, Canada and the United States have been cooperating right up to the level of the president and our prime ministers to develop critical mineral supply chains to feed into decarbonization. We know we need critical minerals in order to reduce GHG emissions, for electrification, car batteries, electric vehicles. We also need critical minerals for technology, AI, and we need critical minerals to meet our national security objectives. Many of the technologies that are used in national defense and national security are powered with critical minerals. And without them, we don't have those technologies, and it puts our national security at risk.
It's hard to imagine that interdependence between Canada and the United States on these critical minerals is going to change. No matter what, the talk and the incredible amount of noise around tariffs, I don't think is going to take away the fact that we need to be able to develop these relationships with the United States and to secure them. I bring this up because we also know that Donald Trump has his eye on critical mineral supplies. He's looking at Ukraine. He's looking at Greenland. He's not staying, okay, we're only going to get them from the United States. So the longer we wait to be able to get to the point where we can deliver these to market, does that jeopardize our ability to then be able to sell them, tariffs or not?
Well, I mean, let's go to the top there. The fact of the matter is that the United States, as the most dynamic economy in the world, has significant demand for critical minerals. Nothing will change that. Where do those critical minerals come from? They come from China and they come from Canada. Many of the critical minerals that the United States needs The primary supplier is China. The secondary supplier is Canada. So President Trump may say, we don't need Canada's critical minerals or energy, et cetera. The fact of the matter is that they do. In fact, Canada exports some 80 billion in minerals and metals annually. Around half of that goes to the US, right? British Columbia, 7% of BC's exports to the United States are critical minerals and metals, primarily from Rio Tinto's smelter in Kitimat, that's aluminum, and from Teck's trail operations in southeast BC, and that includes germanium, which we've heard a lot about as of late, lead, zinc, and a handful of other specialty metals. So, there's we aren't as dependent on the U.S. as, say, Ontario and Quebec here in BC. All of our copper, our gold, and our steelmaking coal goes elsewhere, primarily to Asia, Japan, Korea, China, etc. So there is, we are not as dependent on the U.S. market, so we're less vulnerable right now to the 10% tariff that Trump has threatened to impose on our critical minerals.
Which may be on today or off this afternoon or back on tomorrow morning.
This morning he announced on Truth Social that the tariff on steel and aluminum was going to be 50%. We'll wait to see tomorrow if that in fact is the case.
The production of this program is made possible thanks to the support of the following and viewers like you. We need to have certainty to be able to attract the investment dollars that are required to go after the critical minerals that are in the ground. Let's talk about what the potential is of the 16 or 17 different projects that are literally ready to go and are in the chute of the permitting process, and what that means to the economy of British Columbia. Because there's no doubt we need to be exploring and promoting the development of this kind of economic activity to offset any of the downside that tariffs may play in other aspects of the British Columbia economy.
Yeah. Well, those seven, so right now BC has 17 critical mineral projects on the books for development. 4 of those are on Premier Eby's list of 18 natural resource projects that he announced last month as a response to the Trump tariffs. There's also 5 precious metal or gold projects that are under development. One is, looking for a final investment decision and for construction. There's also several steelmaking coal projects coming along. One in southeast, Fording River expansion, and several up north. Those projects represent a generational opportunity for British Columbia's economy and for British Columbians. But one has to look at those in the context of what's going on today. In BC's economy, we've got a challenged economy. Forestry is under significant pressure. There's not enough fiber being produced. Puts pressure on mills, puts pressure on pulp and paper. We've seen several mill closures, many mill closures the last few years. We have several fantastic LNG projects, and there's talk potentially of across Canada, some new pipelines, et cetera. Mining needs to be looked at as a generational opportunity, but as a way now of necessity, that mining and critical minerals are about securing our economic future. There's not a lot in the hopper right now, and we've got 4 capital projects that have just wound down. LNG Canada, the pipeline associated with that, Site C and TMX pipeline.
Right.
That's $100 billion in investment. That's kept BC's economy afloat the last few years. Those are all done. Mining has to play a lead role in BC's economic future. Without that, I think I would argue we're in significant trouble.
So let's talk about the economic scale of these projects. What can it potentially mean to the economy of British Columbia?
So we conducted an economic impact analysis on the 17 critical mineral projects that are under development. Just those 17 projects, if they should reach construction and are developed and constructed, that represents a capital investment of $36 billion into BC's economy, which is nothing to sneeze at. That's quite significant. When you look at what will that do for jobs, that would equal something along the lines of 300,000 person hours of employment. What that is in a dollar value, that's $23 billion in wages for British Columbians to build those projects. That's $23 billion for workers. On the tax side, what would those projects do for tax revenue for British Columbia? $11 billion in taxes.
Into the government coffers?
Into government coffers. All three levels of government, primarily the provincial government. We need that tax revenue.
There's also going to be significant need to build out infrastructure to support those projects as they move forward. That's another economic benefit in just in the development of it, but then the spin-off benefits of having that infrastructure in place are maybe not something that we can even calculate at the moment.
That's bang on, Stu. I mean, a good example of that is the electric infrastructure that's required to be built in order to make sure a mine can operate. All our mines are as fully electrified today as they can be. New mines need a new source of electricity. If you look at BC Hydro's capital plan, there's a number of lines that are there to feed into new mines, LNG, and a few other projects, for example, the Port of Prince Rupert. The North Coast transmission line that BC Hydro is planning underway right now with a number of First Nations, the CapEx required to build that is several $billion. That's a capital investment that will go into the BC economy in order to put that transmission line up.
The production of this program is made possible thanks to the support of the following and viewers like you. First Nations play a very important role here. And if we're taking a look at the permitting process timelines and whatnot, what is the relationship with First Nations and how does that intersect with the provincial permitting processes?
Very good question. First Nations do play a significant role in the permitting process in BC. And, we'll start, you mentioned off the top. I mean, right now, there is a lot of focus and attention in British Columbia, both in government and industry and among nations, looking at permitting and authorizations. How can we expedite and speed permitting up for mines?
Right, because in essence, we have kind of two processes, don't we? We have the First Nations go through their process, and the province and the feds also go through their process. Is there some way that we can bring those together? And what would be the benefit in the processing, pipeline?
Mm-hmm. There should be a way to bring them together. Permitting a mine really, when you are exploring for minerals and metals, there's a whole permitting process that takes place on exploration. Then you get to a development project stage. And really, what we look at as operating mines for permitting in order to get to construction is when we start to do the consultation work prior to putting in a project description for an environmental assessment. Mm-hmm. And then with the environmental assessment, there's what they call an Environmental Management Act permit. In BC, there's the Mines Act permit, and then there's a number of federal permits. First Nations need to be part of that permitting process. We call those Indigenous referrals. There is legal precedents and jurisprudence that First Nations in Canada and British Columbia must be consulted, right?
Absolutely.
and accommodated. Not a problem with that. No. That's all good. And not new news to the mining industry. We've been advancing work with First Nations for decades now, and are proud to be helping advance economic reconciliation. When you have a number of different layers and people, nations and other stakeholders that need to be consulted in the permitting process, it adds time, right, and complexity. So what we're trying to do is to work with the Crown, with the government, and work with nations to try and speed that up. One of the challenges, go back to your first question, is that many nations in British Columbia don't have the proper capacity in order to participate in major mine permitting or permitting for other large natural resource projects. They don't have the administrative capacity, the technical capacity, or the governance capacity. And one of the things that we have been saying as an industry is the Crown now needs to step up and provide the resources to enable nations to participate on a level playing field with the Crown in government-to-government negotiations over a project and with industry.
Yeah.
When environmental assessment is such a large, complex undertaking that when a project proponent adds up all of the binders that get submitted to the Environmental Assessment Office, they can be 20 feet high. So you can imagine putting those into a few wheelbarrows and bringing them into a chief and counselor's office of a nation and saying, could you review this for us and please opine and respond and have your qualified professionals provide us with your feedback on binder 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And the chief and counsel say, yeah, we could get that back to you next year. We have some other burning issues that we need to deal with, and besides, we don't have the capacity in-house to do this, right? So that's something that we all can kind of come together on and do and provide and try and make haste.
So if we can work that out, what do you think the time saving in the permitting process might be? Could it be a year? Could it be 18 months?
Sure, you'd have to do it on a nation-by-nation basis. Every nation is different, and they have different requirements, and they have different views on what is risk, right? So that's hard to say. Generally speaking, in British Columbia right now, there's a number of examples. Say there's a gold mine that's into construction up in northern BC. It took 11 years to be permitted. Essentially, let's say it takes 10 to 12 years to permit a mine. And across Canada, it's generally kind of 10 to 15.
Right. And those in the mining sector know that.
Oh, yeah. And government knows that too, because government is responding. Government doesn't disagree. I mean, if you look at the current provincial government's Premier Eby's mandate letters to his ministry, expediting permitting is a core theme across a number of ministries. So there's a willingness to look at it. What we really need to do is we need action, and we need people to start rolling up their sleeves and getting down to work.
So do you think there's a willingness to do that part?
There needs to be. I think there is. There's no silver bullets. Following the recent election, there was a bipartisan support from the NDP government and from the BC Conservatives. I don't think anyone disputes the fact that we need to speed mine permitting. And in today's context, where we're needing to secure our economic future, that is all the more important, right? We'd like to see permitting in British Columbia ultimately be a competitive advantage for our province, in our industry, our workers, our nation partners, so that when we look across Canada, whether it's Alberta Manitoba, Ontario, and Quebec, that the capital markets and the industry look at BC and they say, you know, they've made some changes there. They've reduced complexity. They've shortened time frames. You know, we'd like to be able to say that we brought time frames down to permit and authorize a mine from, say, 10 years down to 5. You know, that's where we'd like to get to.
That would unleash an economic tsunami if you could reduce it by 50%.
That would be very, very helpful and would send a very strong message to capital markets, which, you know, you mentioned off the top right now. I mean, it's no secret when people look at Canada and that's all provinces, Canada is viewed as a difficult place to get things done.
Yes.
And, you know, whomever should succeed in the coming federal election, whether it's Pierre Poilievre or the new Liberal leader, Mark Carney, they have a job to do to get the economy moving in Canada and to bring Canada back to a place where foreign direct investment can see that they'll get a return and that it's welcome.
Mm-hmm.
And that is, you know, if it ain't job one, it's certainly up there in the top 3 things. And you look at the level of FDI in Canada and investor satisfaction is very low, and that impacts everything in our economy right down to, you know, the falling, really terrible numbers on GDP per capita and productivity. You can't improve that without investment. And mining in Canada is being viewed now as a key industry to secure the whole nation's economic future.
The production of this program is made possible thanks to the support of the following and viewers like you. Well, the other element of it, of course, is that we're selling the output to international markets, and we're bringing in money to the Canadian economy. And that's the only way that we really grow the Canadian economy. So it's essential, well, it's critical that we move in a direction that starts to allow us to realize these benefits.
We are a small trading nation. Up until the last month or two, our you know, our ally and partner next door was a key part of our economic success. We can no longer depend on that relationship. Those who would dispute that we're not in a critical or pivotal moment in Canada, I don't think are really watching what's going on. You know, those tariffs will, if they stick, they will decimate Canada's economy.
All the more reason why we need to build out other foreign markets.
It's a wake-up call.
It really is.
And that's how we have to view this. It's a wake-up call that must, you know, it's a wake-up call that needs to catalyze action, right? There's been a lot of talk at the federal level and provincially about getting mining going. You know, for the past several years, we've had a critical minerals strategy federally, and we had one tabled in January 2024. It's now time to move from talk to action. And I can tell you that if we don't do that, we are not, you know, you will hear the sucking sound of talent and investment to the United States of America. I mean, leaving aside the tariffs, Stu, there is an executive order that President Trump delivered last month that is focused on energy and critical minerals. And the whole purpose of that order is to clear federal lands for mining and for critical minerals, to push back on the EA and push back on the Department of the Interior and get critical minerals and energy developed. And if they're successful in reducing their permitting timelines, and they're committed to do that, that's going to be very difficult for Canada.
Thank you for this sobering talk.
My pleasure. It's always great to come and chat with you on Conversations That Matter. Thank you.